Phaues Tankervilleae is supposed to be one of the easiest growing orchids, and they're supposed to be far easier than any other orchid. But why do people have so much trouble growing them? We'll go through a quick cultural sheet here, and perhaps we can find what your problem may be to get your beauty to flower. Welcome to the Nature Company. If this is the kind of information you're interested in, please hit that subscribe button down below if you haven't already, and that notification bell to be notified of all our upcoming content so you don't miss out on a thing. So in saying Phaius is one of the easiest orchids to grow, one of the reasons is that it is so accommodating as to the temperatures. They can range anything from as low as 2 to 4 degrees Celsius all the way up to the mid to high 30s. That's approximately 40 degrees Fahrenheit to about 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And with this, in these ranges, it can still actually flower. Of course, it doesn't like to be in those cold temperatures for too longer periods, and below freezing can cause a problem because they are frost tender. But if they're in suboptimal climates, they're going to lose all their leaves anyway, and then it's easy to protect those pseudobulbs with a covering of some sort from frost. So you should be able to get away with those too, or by moving it just indoors during those frost periods. Also, one of the reasons that they're so easy is because a lot of people may be into their house plants, and this you can grow in almost an identical media to a house plant with pretty much the same treatment. Some of the medias that are most often used are things like compost, peat, a bark mulch, vermiculite. These are all common in the media used for your Phaius. They're like a well-drained media that does hold moisture. They're pretty moisture-loving plants. They don't like to dry out completely for too long, except for winter, especially if they've lost all their leaves. So we have to ensure, with all that moisture around them all the time, that we're giving them good air circulation. Good air circulation is critical because botrytis loves them. And if we're keeping all that moisture around and the air movement is stagnant, you know it's going to get in there and destroy your whole plant. And it can happen so quickly. So ensure good air movement, especially keeping it indoors. So if you're wondering how to mix these media, some of the common mixes would be your bark mulch with your peat as a 1-to-1 ratio, or otherwise what I often use is my cymbidium mix, which I'll link the video down below to give you the exact mixes for that, with the organic compost, with manure, and sometimes even with things like the vermiculite to hold that extra moisture. They're relatively heavy feeders because they are such fast growers. That's one of the reasons I like to put that manure in, and then those organic fertilizer pellets that I add every month. In winter, if we've got a mild winter, I can keep the leaves on my Phaius. But if our temperatures go down too low and there's not enough humidity and not enough rain, or I don't water frequently, then it will lose all its leaves. And then I start to give it further rest. Then I'll withhold watering until spring starts to come around and we can see that new growth starting to form again. But we've also got to remember these flower in late winter through early spring. So keep an eye out for that. If you have given it a winter rest, remember to perhaps start your watering marginally earlier than you would otherwise to ensure that you do get those flower spikes to mature properly. Also, their light requirements, they're actually pretty versatile in their lighting requirements. I prefer to give them bright shade. So somewhere where they're not going to get any direct sun whatsoever. I generally find I get better flowering if I do that. Although some people swear by keeping them in full sun, they get the most amazing blooms. So this is pretty much going to be a how you would want to grow your plant. And then you've just got to ensure that you're not burning the leaves. If you're trying to get it into more light, remember to do it in stages, so that you don't go outright and give your plant's leaves sunburn. You want to introduce higher light levels slowly so that it can acclimatize to the higher light. Also, again, making them so easy is their humidity needs. They will range anything from between 30 to 70 50% humidity levels with a breeze. But if you're sticking it around 50, this will suit them the best. And with the temperature also, if you can provide them with that cooling in the evening, especially during that autumn-winter period, to ensure that you can set those flower spikes well. And as I was saying, in suboptimal conditions, these will lose all their leaves, and it's nothing that you have to worry about because they are semi-evergreen. Depending on how you're looking after them, they can keep their leaves all year round. This is leaves from the previous year's growth over here, and this is all the new year's growth, and we are already heading through into autumn at the moment. So don't be worried if your plants do start losing their leaves what would seem like prematurely, because they can be totally leafless at times of the year. And being such vigorous growers, remember that feeding regime. If you're keeping them in active growth throughout the winter and they're keeping their leaves, they can still form new buds and shoots that come off. Remember to keep your feeding regime up. At least once a month with those organic pellets if you're going that route, or with your generalized balanced orchid food. So at least once a month throughout the year. During its active growth seasons, during spring and summer, you can bump those up to twice a month or every second week. Even then, if you're feeding with organic liquid fertilizers, you can go weekly during those growing periods. And these are such vigorous growers, they're even known to have become invasive weeds in places like Jamaica and Hawaii, with their origins being from the east through China, Malaysia, Thailand, all the way through up into Hong Kong and Taiwan. They generally grow at slightly higher elevations, and that's why they're so adaptable to those different humidity levels, the different sunlight levels, and to the different temperatures. And because they often grow in boggy lands that will be boggy during that growing season and then dry out through the winter seasons, they can adapt to just about anything. And also with your repotting, if you're keeping them in smaller pots, you might actually have to even repot them every year. And this you'll do just after flowering. As soon as they finish their flowering, it's time to pot them up so that those new growths can really set in and root well. And you want to try and keep approximately 4 pseudobulbs on each section. This will just ensure that you don't minimize the flowering of the next season. Also, if you're looking to produce multiple plants from your individual plant, when you're doing that potting up, you can divide them, as I said, keep 4 back bulbs on each of those subdivisions. Try to cut off as few roots as possible. They really like to keep that root volume, especially if they've got leaves, because these leaves are so large, a lot of evaporation is going to take place, and they need those roots to draw up the moisture to keep their transpiration going. With the flowering spikes, as your flower spikes have finished flowering, what you can always do is trim them off down at the base, and just at the top where they below the first flower that had opened, and you'll have that long cane that's got all those nodes along it. Each of those nodes has a dormant bud. That dormant bud can develop and grow into a new pseudobulb. So what we're going to do with that is either cut it into segments or keep it as one long piece if you can. Lay it down on some sphagnum moss and just cover up the ends as well so that it doesn't dehydrate through the stem. And if you don't have sphagnum moss, if you've got some damp river sand, that's going to drain quickly but still keep that moisture and humidity for that stem so that it doesn't dry out before those buds can produce their little plantlets. And when you're doing this, remember to put it into a fairly well shaded area. It wants less light than what you're going to be giving your plant, so perhaps put it under your table or your orchid bench, just there, so that it can stay moist, and give it between 2 and 3 months for those buds to really set in. And once they've produced 3 or 4 little roots, then you can start dividing them off that used flower spike and pot them up separately, and you're probably looking at only between 2 and 3 years before you've got another flowering size plant. So that just goes to show how quickly they grow and mature. Now, armed with all this information, you should be able to get success with your Phaius. Keep trying. It will forgive you for being moved around a bit, but in each position, allow it to settle in first, because you don't want to be swapping positions before it even gets a chance to settle in and to do its trick. Otherwise, all you're doing is giving it stress, and then it's not going to be flowering. So now that you know all the light requirements, the watering requirements, the feeding requirements, the temperatures and humidity that you should be keeping your Phaius at, and if you've got any other house plants, you should have great success with this too. Happy Phaius growing, and thank you for watching. If you found any of this information helpful, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button down below, and that notification bell, bing bong, to be notified of all our upcoming content so you don't miss out on a thing. Help us grow as we help your orchids grow.